Hi everyone, Nubkeks here, and in today's video, we're going to be doing our weekly update on the beta. What were the big class changes in this week's beta patch? Just before we dive in, I just want to give a big shout out to the new patrons. We got a bunch of new guys over on Patreon, so thank you so much for the support. I really hope that you're enjoying the content and that I can keep doing this stuff for you guys. So yeah, let's start with the Death Knight, and we're going to start off with Blood. If we jump into the talent tree, Ossuary is gone. But it's not gone. No, it's now baseline. So Ossuary is now a baseline thing. This is fantastic. This has been a mandatory talent for the Blood Death Knight for probably, was it 4 years? At least 4 years. Anyway, as you can see right there, when you've got 5 charges of Bone Shield, it's going to lower the cost of Death Strike by 5 runic power, and it also increases your max runic power by 10. The big gameplay thing that this can let you do, for example, is to store up 3 Death Strikes with your max runic power instead of having just 2 Death Strikes with max runic power, which is obviously very good for surviving like big burst damage and danger situations. So this is very strong. To make up for this coming baseline, they did move Blood Tap onto the talent tree. This was formerly baseline, a new baseline ability in Shadowlands. Now it is a talent. That being said, it's competing with Foul Bulwark and with Relish in Blood. So I actually think that Blood Tap might ironically be the better option here just overall, which is 2 charges with the 1 minute recharge and lots of cooldown reduction whenever a Bone Shield charge is consumed. But it just gives you a rune for free off the global cooldown. I suspect you'll probably most of the time be playing with this, so there's not too much of a change there, but at least it's nice to have Ossuary properly guaranteed baseline. You're going to always have this, which is wonderful. For the Frost Death Knight, I don't think I covered this last week, just in case I didn't. Might of the Frozen Wastes. This is your passive, which affects either your dual wield one-handing playstyle or your two-handed weapon playstyle that's new in Shadowlands. They did buff the Obliterate damage on the two-handed weapon playstyle, so it now does 35% more damage on your Obliterates, which is pretty cool. That being said, in this week's beta patch, so this passive change was last week. In this week's beta patch, they have lowered the damage of Obliterate. So I think this is sort of a balancing thing, seeing as Obliterate, when it consumes a killing machine in Shadowlands, now does frost damage. And when you stack that on top of the Might of the Frozen Wastes, it was doing a ton of damage, and especially Obliteration builds were a big deal. So it's certainly something to keep an eye on, this tuning. It actually matters, I would say, for frost DKs quite a bit, because it's going to either probably push you towards dual wielding or two-handed, because those have significant effects on your gameplay, and it's going to also push you between the Breath of Syndragosa, the big 2-minute kind of burst cleave cooldown, or Obliteration, which is more about spamming those Obliterates. So the tuning on that does matter quite a bit. Just something to be aware of, that they are working on that. It is the Unholy Death Knight, though, for the DKs that got the most changes in this week's patch. They got a whole bunch of stuff. Number one, Dark Transformation, which was formerly a cooldown that you pressed to turn your ghoul into a bigger ghoul. That has been just baked into Apocalypse. The two have been combined. So you no longer have a Dark Transformation button. Instead, Apocalypse will simply turn your ghoul into its Dark Transformation version for 15 seconds. Going alongside of that then, your Death Coil is now going to just reduce the cooldown of Apocalypse by 1.5 seconds. So that's kind of cool. Even more, though, on top of that, Epidemic is now a baseline ability, guys. Epidemic is baseline, and of course this means at a baseline level, Sudden Doom is of course now going to be not only that proc will make your next Death Coil free, but you could also use it to make your next Epidemic free. So that's pretty exciting. It's really good, I think, to have Epidemic baseline. That gives a really good feel to the Unholy DK, sets it apart from Frost as having this big, damage runic power spender for AoE baseline. Now, obviously, the talent tree has seen some changes to make up for this. So, Summon Gargoyle, which was introduced as a baseline ability at the start of the Shadowlands beta, or during the Shadowlands beta, this has gone back onto the talent tree. Okay, it's back onto the talent tree in place of Unholy Pact. Unholy Pact has been moved down a tier to replace where Epidemic was. So that's essentially the change there. So at level 45 now, you're choosing between Pestilence, Death and Decay, Applying Festering Wounds, Unholy Pact, which is it's very cool. It's the fiery chains between you and your pet. In fact, let me just show you this here. So Apocalypse, bam, we pop Apocalypse, there we go, and our ghoul's going in and he's blasting, right? But this is the Unholy Pact. Gives you that strength buff and the fiery chains between, or then Defile. So this is like the AoE sort of damage tier. Unholy Pact is probably my favorite option. And then at level 50, you've got Army of the Damned. Just giving you, reduced cooldown on Apocalypse and Army of the Dead, and summoning a Magus of the Dead as well. Summon Gargoyle is in there. And then Unholy Assault. Now, I will say Unholy Assault is now a little bit weird, right? So Unholy Assault, 1.3 minute cooldown. That was obviously designed to sync up with the 1.3 minute cooldown of Apocalypse. And also, obviously their intent, Apocalypse pops 4 Festering Wounds. Unholy Assault applies 4 Festering Wounds. The idea was supposed to be, for sure, that you would hit them with Unholy Assault and then hit them with Apocalypse, and that would smooth out your opener. The issue right now, though, of course, is, well, Apocalypse is no longer really a 1.3 minute cooldown because it's getting its cooldown reduced every single time I death coil. So unless I'm in some sort of pure AoE situation where I'm only pressing Epidemic and never ever a death coil, Apocalypse, the cooldown's going to go down quite a lot. I would say on average you're probably looking to do an Apocalypse about every 1 minute or so. So that kind of syncs up well with the Venthyr cooldown very much. It syncs up with every second Death's Due, or every third Death's Due if you take Defile. Because once Defile works with Death's Due, I still don't think it does. But yeah, that's sort of the idea. And then I think you, for example, delay Unholy Blight. So to show you an example sort of opener now, we could even just ditch the Summon Gargoyle. Though I think you probably... I like the Summon Gargoyle, so maybe I'd stick with that. But if we go for Army of the Damned, which is more cooldown reduction, we'll go with Unholy Blight. Our opener might be something like this. Like, we'll just drop in our Death and Decay. We're going to pop our Unholy Blight. We'll pop on a few wounds, and then we're going to pop our Apocalypse. And there you go. I guess we could throw in our Army of the Dead here as well. And just start blasting some damage. We're going to pop our wounds then with Scourge Strike. And we're going to spend our Runic Power when we can. You can see those procs coming in for free. And yeah, I think you get the idea here, right? I think you get the idea. It's a much smoother opener. Like, oh my goodness. It is so much smoother. You get into your opening rotation a lot faster. This is a substantial change to the Unholy DK. Obviously, if you know, without Unholy Blight, you'd do Outbreak instead. And you could take Summon Gargoyle and have an extra CD in there. I actually think this feels pretty good. I think they might have nailed it with this one, actually. I definitely think removing Dark Transformation, baking it into Apocalypse, does really smooth out the rotation an awful lot. It really does. So, yeah, this might be the change that was needed. It's obviously somewhat of a bummer to remove some of those cooldowns because they're sort of the defining thing of Unholy. But I think just combining them into the same button press actually feels good and works well. So, there you go. Unholy DK. Quite a big change there and really smoothing out your opening rotation. Over in Demon Hunter land, specifically the Vengeance Demon Hunter, I'm afraid I have some bad news here, guys, because it's Nerf City right now for the Vengeance Demon Hunter. Lots of nerfs coming in from you. I don't know why everyone is glowing here. Why is everyone glowing? This is quite odd. Super glowy people. I don't know. Anyway, but yeah, so this obviously might seem kind of strange if you're coming from the live server perspective, where Vengeance, you know, is okay, but not a top tier tank. I believe on the beta servers that Vengeance was considered an absolute top tier tank. With their current tuning, that has been toned down. So what has changed? Maybe one of the most disappointing things is that Fell Devastation has gone up to a 1 minute cooldown. That's up from 45 seconds. And the Demonic talent, which pairs with that, has been nerfed as well, much like the Havoc Demon Hunter one was at the start of the beta. It now gives you Demon Form for 6 seconds. That's down from 8 seconds. That's quite a big thing. So instead of having 8 seconds of Demonic every 45 seconds, so like 8 into 40, about 20% uptime, maybe like 18% uptime or something, with 6 seconds out of every 60, that's 10%. So they've almost halved the uptime, excuse me, of Metamorphosis that you're going to get with this. So that's a real bummer. Yeah, that's a real bummer for sure. That's kind of what I got to say about that. Now, they also, slightly weirdly, they have nerfed Soul Cleave. Its healing effect. So first of all, they have nerfed where is it? Is it just part of Soul Cleave? I don't know where this is in the thing. So your soul fragments, are they part of the Demon Hunter spellbook? It's kind of weird. Yeah, okay, they are. So Shattered Souls, this has been nerfed. Now, consuming a lesser soul fragment will heal you for 6% of all damage taken in the last 5 seconds. That is down from 8% of all damage taken in the last 5 seconds. So they have nerfed that down. Your little soul fragments are healing you for less. Soul Cleave, the healing has also gone down. So I think they upped the baseline healing. So when you use Soul Cleave with no soul fragments, it's going to heal you for more, I believe. However, for each soul fragment that you're going to consume with Soul Cleave, it's now going to heal you for a bit less. So they're just sort of de-emphasizing the importance of those soul fragments. I believe this might be somewhat targeted at Spirit Bomb. So they're just trying to, yeah, make the soul fragments less important and make just spamming more Soul Cleaves more important. We'll have to see, but certainly these are targeted nerfs at the Demon Hunter, trying to lower their power a little bit.
Yeah, so we'll see exactly. I expect more tuning, of course. Definitely disappointing to see Fell Devastation nerfed, but there you are. That's the Demon Hunter change. For ye old Druid, who I flew to the Night Phase Sanctum like 2 days ago. I haven't touched it since, but we're still on the flight path 2 days later. And through a server reset and a patch. You can't write this stuff. A couple of small tweaks to the Druid, though. Very small tweaks. So the first small tweak is that Innervate is now off the global cooldown, but the duration has therefore been lowered from 12 seconds to 10. Right, from 12 seconds to 10. Overall, I think this is an improvement. It flows better, it fits better with the spec, and that does make sense. Also, mostly for the Guardian Druids, good news, but they have buffed the armor from Iron Fur by, I believe, about 10%, something along those lines. So, yeah, that's great news. Iron Fur, the armor that you're getting from it is slightly stronger, so yeah, there you go. Small changes, but that's the Druid. Over for the Beast Mastery Hunter, there has been a change to Bestial Wrath, actually. So, of course, this was kind of... People were talking about Bestial Wrath last week when they removed Aspect of the Wild from the GCD, they removed True Shot, and they removed Coordinated Assault. So all the major Hunter cooldowns were removed from GCD, but Bestial Wrath was left on it, and people thought, this is kind of weird, why is this not off? Well, they've come back, and Bestial Wrath is now going to instantly do 800 physical damage to the target. It's kind of weird in the wording. Like, if we read the specific wording, sends you and your pet into a rage, instantly dealing 800 physical damage to its target. It should be to their target, or and your pet instantly does 800 damage to its target. I think they forgot that Bestial Wrath actually affects you when they were wording it, because I think the affecting you part is like a leveling perk or something. But anyway, so there you go. So if we, again, compare it to a kill command, it's not quite as strong as a kill command. But let's fire this off. We'll do a couple of these guys. Bestial Wrath. It's not really that noticeable, to be honest with you. Like, you wouldn't really notice that your pet just didn't attack there, but it does. It does. So your pet is now going to attack, and that's sort of the theory behind the Bestial Wrath. Again, sort of a problem with the Hunter. Their animations aren't the best, and I think that sort of takes away from the idea here of the Bestial Wrath thing. We can certainly see the appeal to it. And I just wanted to also cover, because people were giving out to me, and they said, Nubkeks, you're a big noob and you suck. It's Bestial Wrath. It's Bestial.
Bestial.
No, it's Bestial. So you've learned something in today's video. If only this, you've learned. Over for the Monk then, let's start with the Brewmaster Monk. We're going to start off with a significant enough buff, which is to Shuffle. So this is whenever you do your attacks that are going to increase the effectiveness of your stagger. This has been buffed from a 75% increase to a 100% increase. So your stagger damage is going to be even more effective now. In the Shadowlands, you're going to stagger even more damage. But of course, every good thing comes with a price. It comes with a cost. And that costs are nerfs to your Purifying Brew and to your Celestial Brew. Let's touch on Celestial Brew first, because this is the biggest nerf. I think number one, they slightly lowered the value of this. But number two, this was formerly a 30-second cooldown. It is now a 1-minute cooldown. So they doubled the cooldown of Celestial Brew. For Purifying Brew, they knocked this up from a 15-second recharge to a 20-second recharge. So obviously this, in particular Celestial Brew, that's a substantial nerf. That being said, I do think it makes sense. I think this makes sense. Purifying Brew, I really like it having a longer cooldown. Actually, that works a lot better, because the issue with Purifying Brew is, right, because it removes your stagger. It removes half of your stagger. The thing is, with the 2 charges, that means that because you just removed your stagger, there's not really a point in chucking the second charge right after that, because it gets less value. You kind of have to wait a while for your stagger to build back up. So oftentimes what could happen with Purifying Brew, I found with the 15-second recharge, was that you were just sort of chugging them, kind of for the sake of it, just for something to do, because it was better to just press the button and have at least 1 charge always rolling than to just have 2 charges sat there unused, or mostly unused. So I actually think that makes sense, and having more thought going to Purifying Brew makes sense too. And you'll have more stuff to purify with the buff Shuffle. And then Celestial Brew, let's be honest, Celestial Brew made you basically invincible when it was on. It was so powerful. So I think nerfing it down also does make sense. I think that does make sense. Is it over nerfed? Not sure. Not sure. We'll have to see what the tuning is, but that's the whole point of tuning, is to find the particular point. I know I've seen a lot of very unhappy Brewmasters on Twitter and stuff. They're like, we've been the best raid tank for the entire expansion. Oh, how dare they nerf us here? No, I'm messing with you guys. But I think it's a fine change. Now, interestingly enough, I do want to draw your attention then to level 30 row. You got Spitfire, of course, which is total garbage. But Light Brewing, now reduce the cooldown, Purifying Brew and Celestial Brew. That's pretty significant. That brings the Purifying Brew down to 15 seconds. Brings Celestial Brew down to 48. Okay? Black Ox Brew is going to refill your energy, refill your Purifying Brew charges, and reset the cooldown of Celestial Brew. So Black Ox Brew just got a massive buff. That's a massive buff in terms of the reset on the Celestial Brew in particular. That is absolutely huge. So definitely something to look at. And of course, right now the top Covenant, because it got buffed since last time I think I looked at, because it's been a while since I looked at Brewmaster, but Bone Dust Brew, right, that got majorly buffed in terms of the damage, the extra damage that it does. And also Tiger Palm and Keg Smash reduce the cooldown of your brews by an additional 1 second when striking enemies with Bone Dust Brew active. And Bone Dust Brew is itself a brew, right? Is itself a brew, so that's kind of important. You can see we can knock potentially a lot of cooldown reduction off this, right? We'll just press some of our stuff. So there you go, and it reduces the cooldown of the Bone Dust Brew itself. So this is looking very strong right now. It does solid damage, and it's going to give you a lot more uptime on those defensives. So just something to be aware of. For the Mistweavers then, they also got a few tweaks. So the first tweak is kind of the same thing they did for Innervate Mana Tea. It's been reduced from 12 seconds to 10 seconds, but it has been removed from the global cooldown. So that, I think, again, is a very nice perk. That feels an awful lot better to play with. So that's a great change to Mana Tea. Very good. They have then nerfed the Celestials, right? So your new Invokes have been nerfed. So Invoke Yu'lon, you'll summon the effigy of Yu'lon for 25 seconds on a 3-minute cooldown. So she's going to heal an injured ally with Soothing Breath and will heal up to 2 additional allies nearby for over 4.2 seconds. So I think they made the heal duration, I think they increased it from 4 to 4.5. It's reduced by haste here. And they also lowered the number of allies. I think she was healing up to 5 additional allies. Now she's only healing up to 2 additional allies. So again, this is just a tuning thing. It's not really going to affect your gameplay all that much. It's just the tuning of it, because, I mean, this is just, she's off doing her thing, and that doesn't really interact with you. Invoke Chi-Chi, the Red Crane, then, has also been nerfed. He's also been nerfed. So he is now increased from a 2-minute cooldown up to a 3-minute cooldown. So I think the purpose of this is to make it just to sync up the cooldowns of Yu'lon and Chi-Chi, so you don't feel kind of bad from a cooldown perspective if you don't take Chi-Chi. I think that's the idea right there. They've also nerfed him as well, so he's going to kick up Gust of Mist with your physical abilities, healing up to 2 allies for 500 every time you do damage, right? Every time you do physical damage, he's going to heal up to 2 allies on top of, you know, stacking up the Enveloping Mist thing. So yeah, tweaks to those. Again, I feel like this is sort of a tuning thing as well. Hopefully these cooldowns are going to feel very satisfying. That's certainly the goal. And that's the big thing that I'd be looking to have improved for Mistweaver over its BFA version in Shadowlands, is this potential with these invokes to up what was the most boring part of the Mistweaver toolkit, which was its cooldowns. You needed Wave the Crane with the PvP talent with Conflict and Strife to feel good, in my opinion, through the Mistweaver cooldowns. So yeah, Invoke Chi-Chi being baseline, at least it's good. But yeah, I think the cooldown change does make sense to put it in line. It might even be good to bring them both down to a 2-minute cooldown. That might be better. We'll have to see, but that's the changes for now. Looking then at the Protection Paladin, which has been sort of renowned as the glass cannon of the Shadowlands beta so far, doing tons of damage, but also taking tons of damage. They have gone and they've tried to improve that in this week's beta patch. So first things first, they have upped the armor of Shield of the Righteous. So if we're looking like right now, I've got 29% damage reduction if I fire off some of these abilities. And I've got my Shield of the Righteous. I'm going to go up to 48% damage reduction. So Shield of the Righteous has become it gives you a bit more armor right now, which is very welcome and I think very needed. Then they've also buffed Word of Glory and the passive associated with. So Word of Glory is back to increased healing on yourself up to 300% based on your missing health. So the lower you are in health, it's going to heal you up to 300% extra, which is wonderful. So that's really good. They doubled this from the previous beta build. It was only healing you up to, I think, 150% more. So that's wonderful. And they've also switched up this passive once again, Shining Light. Now the way it works is that every 5 Shield of the Righteous casts will make your next Word of Glory free to cast. So I think that's really fun. This is going to fit into your rotation well. You're just going to be spamming out the Shield of the Righteous, and then after every 5th Shield of the Righteous, you're going to have a big, nice, free Word of Glory to throw in yourself. It's going to be very powerful whenever your health dips low. I think that's going to feel really good on top of just the increased baseline survivability. I mean, the only other, like, obviously other little tuning things like this are great. The big thing, though, Blizzard, you know, seeing as GCD has been a recent topic, if we could remove Word of Glory from the GCD and Frenzied Regen, and for the Druid as well, that sort of thing, I think that stuff would feel great. So just throwing that out there, that would be wonderful. Everyone would like that. So yeah, there we go. Over on the Priest side of things, Discipline Priest has received a number of nerfs in this week's beta build. The first nerf is to Rapture. Rapture, since it was removed from the GCD in the last... no, sorry, excuse me. I misspoke. Rapture is still on the GCD, but when you cast Rapture, it does instantly do one of its buffed up power word shields, right? So if I press Rapture, I instantly will cast the shield on myself. They have lowered the duration of the buff then to 8 seconds. That's down from 10 seconds. I think this is a very reasonable buff to make up for the increase they gave to Rapture. I've played some dungeons here on the Priest so far, and I certainly found that even in like the Mythic Plus that we were doing, that Rapture in a dungeon setting could kind of be a little bit overkill with, you know, the 10-second duration and then the free power word shield as soon as you cast it. That was a bit overkill, and you kind of felt bad. You're kind of sitting there, you know, going, oh, I still have, you know, like a few seconds left of Rapture here. I feel like I should really just spam some more power word shields out, like on the tank or something, even though it's kind of overkill. So yeah, I don't think it's a massive buff for Mythic Plus. It's going to more affect raiding, where obviously the Rapture and the raid, you've got, you know, like in a Mythic raid, you got 20 people that you can put those Rapture shields on. So it kind of affects that. And I think that's totally fine, because look, Disc Priest has been the best raid healer. I mean, competing with Holy Paladin for the last like tier or so. But they've been like top tier raid healer for forever, particularly because of their damage reduction and shielding. So I think a small nerf to that absolutely makes sense. Likewise, Spirit Shell also got nerfed. It's also off the GCD though. So Spirit Shell is off the GCD, but now only is a 10-second buff. It's still very much a question mark whether or not this is actually going to be good or not. It seems quite niche compared to Evangelism or Lenience. So yeah, that's just something to be aware of. And then they did really nerf the Kiss of Death legendary, got massively nerfed. So this still reduces Shadow Word's death cooldown by 8 seconds, but it only will trigger Atonement Healing when you use it in Execute now, so only on targets below 20% health. So that's quite a big nerf. They've also, as you can see, lowered the damage of Shadow Word death slightly, and it now only does 150% bonus damage to targets below 20% health. So they nerfed that down a bit as well. Again, I think these changes are totally warranted. This legendary was just so much better than all the other legendaries for Disc Priest. This was pretty much the only one you were going to run with. And again, you're just doing way too much damage and way too much easy healing with this. So yeah, it's gonna, you know, this obviously sucks for Mythic Plus, where Disc Priest hasn't historically, you know, been a top tier spec, you know, nothing on the degree that Resto Druid has been. But I think it's still going to be relatively decent in Mythic Plus. Like, you're going to be fighting mobs and Execute fairly often, and it will help you top up your team and Execute before you go into the next mob pack, which has always been sort of a weakness of the Disc Priest. You're good at healing your team when you have mobs to beat on, but once those mobs die and you can't hit them, you can't heal through Atonement anymore, so your healing really falls off. So I think it has a niche in that circumstance, but this is no longer the must pick in every circumstance. And again, I think that's a warranted nerf, to be fair. I say as someone that's quite likely to be playing a lot of Disc this expansion, like, I think it's fair. Over on the Shadow Priest side of things then, there are some really exciting changes. Blizzard had recognized that the legendaries for the Shadow Priest were pretty terrible, pretty garbage, were no good, and didn't really work that well with the reworked Shadow Priest. So they have massively improved 2 of them. The first one, excuse me, is the Call to the Void legendary, where this now affects Mindseer as well. So Mindflay and Mindseer have a chance to spawn a Void Tendril that channels at your target for 15 seconds, generating 3 insanity while it deals damage. So if you proc it from a Mindseer, it will channel Mindseer. There we go. In fact, there we go. Our Void Lasher, and he's doing a Mindseer himself, which is super cool. Absolutely love it. If I do Mind Flays, I can spawn in one that's going to do Mind Flays. So this is really good. A wonderful change. I think fits super well. Here we go. I've got my Void Tendril on this guy. You see, he's a smaller tendril, and he's just doing his Mind Flay. Absolutely wonderful change. This is a great legendary. It's visually cool. It's wonderful to have the tentacles come back as a Shadow Priest only thing. And yeah, now it's really good in AoE. Whereas before it was only on Mindplay, it was only purely good in single target. So that's a wonderful improvement. Even more exciting though, is they have totally reworked the Shadow Flame Prism. What this does now is Mind Blast and Shadow Word Death will cause your Shadow Fiend to teleport behind your target, slashing up to 5 nearby enemies for 4,500 Shadow Flame damage. And each time a rift is triggered, the duration of Shadow Fiend is increased by 1.5 seconds. Okay, so obviously, zero question, you're gonna be taking Mindbender with this legendary. So you're gonna get this guy for 15 seconds every 1 minute. Let's pop this thing on. Yeah, this looks kind of insane. Again, to put it in I think it's overtuned, right? To put it in perspective, Devouring Plague is doing 1,300 shadow damage plus an additional 2,500. So that's doing like 3,800 total. So Shadow Flame Prism, every time it triggers, does more than a Devouring Plague to up to 5 enemies. It's a little bit overtuned, but if we just check out exactly what it looks like, so we're going to be wanting to cast, obviously it's synergized with Death and Madness as well. We can get more of these out, but let's throw this guy out. Here we go. We'll fire off our mind thing. There we go. And he's just going to start slashing away, which I think is awesome. His duration is going to be increased as well, which is fantastic. I get some of these out. Obviously, it's going to synergize well with Void Eruption. Whereas Void Eruption, we get 2 of these in a row, which is awesome as well. I know I'm not playing the spec perfectly or anything, but I just want to give you a very rough idea of how strong this guy is going to be. See, that Mindbender is up for absolutely ages right now. Okay, he's only just now despawned. Well, he just did an absurd amount of damage. As you saw right there. And obviously I'm not doing my proper rotation with Devouring Plagues and stuff. I was just trying to see what he could do. So, yeah. Okay, number 1. This is obviously exceptionally overtuned. This does way too much damage right now. Obviously, it does. That being said, if we expect what is this going to be like once it gets nerfed down, I think this is still going to be absolutely fantastic. This is really fun. This makes your Mindbender a lot more interesting. Once your Mindbender is up, it's really going to do super well in AoE. It turns your Mindbender into an actually fun cooldown instead of being a really, really boring cooldown. And you're certainly going to want to play around it. You're going to be considering ways to get in more Mind Blasts and more Shadow Word Deaths into your Mindbender window. And when you do, it's going to feel very rewarding. So, yeah, I think this is phenomenal. So, Shadow Priest now is looking pretty solid. Again, your Shadow Priest specific legendaries, Calls to the Void, is awesome. Get your Tentabros in there. You've got Shadow Word Death consuming your dots and instantly doing some damage. That one's a bit shit, but maybe could be good with Death and Madness. Talbot's Stratagem is the one for boring people. You're just, if you've got all of your dots on the same target, your Mind Blast will do more damage. So that if you're very boring, this is your favorite one. And then, of course, the Shadow Flame Prism. So, yeah, the Shadow Priest legendaries just went from being fairly bad overall to being actually really good. Looking then at the Shaman, and Shaman, they're such an underdog class. You really want to see them do well. So I've got some really good news to bring you today, which makes me very happy. The first thing I want to touch on is for the Enhancement Shaman. Ascendance just received a massive buff. It now will trigger an immediate effect when you activate it. So you'll still transform into the Air Ascendant, but when you do transform, you will immediately deal 3,000 nature damage to all enemies within 8 yards. So it should affect everything within 8 yards of you. So pretty much everything in melee range. And then it still gives you the same bonus as before, reducing the Storm Strike cooldown. And your auto attacks and the Storm Strike will be wind attacks with ranged and bypass armor, blah, blah, blah. So this is really good. Again, like obviously this character doesn't have as good gear on as the Shadow Priest we just looked at, and tuning and stuff still has to happen. But to put it in perspective, like Storm Strike is hitting for 1,800 physical damage. A Sundering is doing 1,800 Flame Strike damage. So doing 3,000 nature damage, that's a very big chunk of damage. That's really, really good. So let's go in. Let's test this thing out here. So, I mean, we'll put on like a Flame Shock. I guess we'll do a Storm Strike, get that on cooldown. Lava Lash, get that on cooldown. Let's summon in our Spirits. Why the hell not? And here we go. Ascendance. And now we start blasting. Gonna fire in a Chain Lightning. Storm Strike. You know what? We'll fire in one of these. Here we go. Oh, we just got so much Maelstrom weapon right there. I can't even spend it. That is hilarious. But yeah, there you go. I can't put it in perspective right there. Like the Wind Strike obviously did a lot of damage, but the Ascendance itself, that did a very nice big chunk of damage. I think this is wonderful. This Ascendance is coming back, guys. Ascendance is coming back. They're determined to make this cool. I think this does fill a big niche for the Enhancement Shaman, which with, it doesn't have these big dramatic cooldowns. Like Suntering is cool, but it's a 40-second cooldown. It feels sort of like a rotational thing. And Feral Spirits, 2-minute cooldown. Feral Spirits are very weak cooldown. Like they're fairly bland. It's nice then to have this big bursty cooldown that feels dramatic and feels badass. That fits in really well. And you're not really competing against much here in this talent tree. Like Earthen Spike is pretty bland and bad. Elemental Spirits is okay. And this is the one that you were taking before. It's kind of like a roll the bones type effect. Like you get these random buffs, and it will depend on what buffs they are, whether they're good with your build. Like if you're the fire build with like Lashing Flames and Hot Hand, and you get 2 fire wolves, you're good. If you get 2 frost wolves, you're kind of crying some tears, right? So Ascendance, I think, looks really good. It doesn't have much competition in the talent tier, and buffs to that are amazing. I'm not supposed to log out. I'm supposed to switch over to Elemental Shaman, which also receives some similar things. So obviously for Resto Shaman, their Ascendance already did something like this. When you activate Ascendance for Resto, it does a burst of healing to your whole group, so it's already good for Resto, or like it's decent for Resto. Ascendance for the Elemental Shaman has also been buffed. Let me put on some intellect weapons here. So you'll transform it still has the same effect from transforming, but now when you transform into the Flame Ascendant, you will instantly cast a lava burst at all enemies affected by your flame shock and refresh your flame shock durations to 18 seconds. So that's pretty exciting. One little concern I do have, I'm not really sure, because obviously with Fire Elemental, our flame shocks are going to last longer. So I don't know, if you popped Fire Ellie first and you got some of these like 36-second flame shocks, and then you popped Ascendance, is it going to like lower the duration of those flame shocks? I'm not sure, but I just love the idea of those instant flame shocks. I think that feels really, really good. So if we show this thing off here, in fact, let's get this guy out and we can actually see how this works. So we'll just start throwing some spells in. There we go. That's good enough. Here we go. Oh no, it just fully reset them. That's really cool. And we still get the same Ellie Shaman effects, which is awesome. With those lava bursts. Gotta love it. So you're just gonna be spamming lava bursts like crazy. We don't even have enough haste to deal with all these lava bursts right now. Bam. Just lava burst galore. So I think that's super fun. Builds into the builds into the fire sort of elemental shaman thing, and I think it's great. Obviously the downside, of course, limited power is a bit meh, but you're giving up Stormkeeper for this, which is a big thing to give up. So we'll have to see, but it's obviously great to see Ellie, the Ascendance talents getting some love, because they are so visually cool and fun. I really, really like that. There's also been a whole bunch of changes as well to Maelstrom and some of the interactions. So the first of all, Static Discharge got slightly buffed. So it's slightly better, but I mean, you still want Echo the Elements, right? You still want that. So anyway, where do we have here? Okay, cool. Okay, so first things first, Elemental Blast actually now generates 30 Maelstrom. So that's going to feel really, really good. That's going to fit in very smoothly to your rotation. It's a lot of Maelstrom, like considering that Lava Burst gives you 10, Lightning Bolt gives you 8 Maelstrom, Elemental Blast giving you 30 Maelstrom every time you cast it. I think they're really trying to make this awesome. In fact, they're trying to make this whole talent tier awesome. It's going to be a tough one. So that's an awesome buff. Echoing Shock has been upgraded. This now does work. If I let's just generate some Maelstrom here. It's going to take a little while. Bear with me. But it now works with like Earthquake, which is really cool. Now let's fire off. This is generate a big chunk. Here we go. So if I do an Echoing Shock, and then I do an Earthquake, bam, bam. Second Earthquake goes off as well. So Echoing Shock, they're trying to just bug fix this, trying to make this interact well with your toolkit. So yeah, love coming in for Echoing Shock. And then Aftershock now once again works with Earthquake, and Earthshock have a 25% chance to refund all Maelstrom spent. So yeah, we'll see exactly what the tuning ends up being on this tier, but they're certainly trying to make this tier awesome. So yeah, interesting. Lots of buffs to that tier across the board. And then finally, oh yeah, they did buff Ice Fury a bit more. Again, I think they just returned it to its BFA functionality. So when you cast Ice Fury, it will do 25 Maelstrom generation itself, and then the next few Frost Shocks, on top of doing really good damage, are also now going to generate 8 Maelstrom every time you cast them. So again, I believe that functionality was there in BFA, but had been removed in the Shadowlands beta, so they just reverted that. But yeah, I think you've got some interesting stuff going on with the Ellie Shaman now, and it's certainly wonderful to see the Ellie Shaman actually get some love. Some actual, you can walk away from this week of Ellie Shaman and go, okay, this week we are actually better than we were before, and that's something to treasure and to cherish. as the shaman, as the LE shaman right now. Oh man. Finally then, for the warrior, they have seen one nice little tweak, which is Vanguard has been buffed. Tooltip now says that your stamina is increased by 45% and your armor is increased by 90% of your strength. So they've increased the armor scaling off your strength. On my prot warrior right now, and again, terrible gear, I have about 40% damage reduction, physical damage reduction from armor. So they've just tried to respond to some of the problems with prot warrior being quite squishy on the beta, and they've upped the armor. So that's really nice for them. And then finally, for the arms warrior, small change to their rend talent. It's now going to have a crit bonus associated with it. So if I show you over here, so rend is over here. You're going to wound the target, doing damage over, doing some instant damage and then some damage over 15 seconds. But more importantly, it's going to increase the critical damage you deal to the enemy by 10%. So rend is going to scale very, very well with the crit stat. And yeah, your crits on that target is going to do a lot more damage, and multi-dotting with rend is going to be a bit more relevant. So I think that's pretty cool. A little bit of love to rend, which is a fun little spell. That competes with Fervor of Battle, which is so-so, not great. Or then it competes with Massacre, which is a bit more important. So we'll see. We'll see. I mean, competing with Massacre is a pretty big deal. That's a lot of damage for arms. So I'm not sure. But that is essentially how it's working. Rend now works at crits. And there you go, guys. They are all the major sort of big changes I wanted to draw attention to. There's a few other like small little changes and stuff that will sort of slip on by. But I think that's plenty of big changes to cover in this video. I hope that you enjoyed. Let me know what you think about them in the comments down below. And I'll see you next time for more WoW Shadowlands beta coverage. See you all then. Bye-bye.